I have been married to Catherine for 35 years. We live in a large brick home in Georgetown. Everything in my life felt solid until I looked at her phone in a hotel room in Cancun. We were there for our oldest son's wedding. It was also our 35th anniversary. I saw messages from a man named Milan. He is her coworker. He is from South Africa. He told her she was sexy. He told her he missed her voice. My wife sent him hearts. She sent him the emojis with hearts in the eyes. I am 60 years old, and I realize now that my marriage is a lie. The Georgetown house has always been my sanctuary. Every night at precisely 11 o'clock, I walk through the halls and perform the same ritual. I check the heavy oak doors. I ensure the double-cylinder deadbolts are turned. I set the alarm system to its stay mode. I place my watch on the nightstand, and I listen to the silence. It is the ritual of a man who believes he has earned his peace. I have spent my career in Washington, D.C., navigating the high-stakes world of international logistics. I have managed risks and secured supply lines for people who do not accept failure. I applied that same clinical focus to my family. I believed that 35 years of history was a fortress that could not be breached. I believed that the 4 sons we raised were the pillars of a life well lived. But as I stood on the balcony of the resort in Cancun, the heat felt like a physical weight. The air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and the sound of the ocean, but all I could feel was the cold vibration of the phone in my hand. Catherine was asleep behind me. She was oblivious to the fact that the blue light from her screen had just illuminated the wreckage of our life. I scrolled through the messages and I felt the reality of our 35 years evaporating. Milan was not just a coworker. He was an interloper who had been welcomed into our home. I remembered the dinners we had with him and his wife. I remembered pouring him expensive scotch while we discussed global trade. I remembered him looking me in the eye while he was secretly planning to dismantle my world. The messages went back months. They were frequent and they were intense. They contained a level of emotional intimacy that Catherine had stopped sharing with me years ago. Milan told her that her eyes lit up the room. He told her that he couldn't wait to hear her voice again. He used heart emojis and the ones with the hearts in the eyes. Catherine responded by telling him that he was the only one who truly understood her. She agreed with him when he said that I was controlling and that I couldn't dictate who her friends were. She was siding with a man from South Africa against the husband who had stood by her through everything. The timing was a surgical strike. We were in Mexico for our son's milestone. We were surrounded by friends and family who saw us as the gold standard of marriage. I had to pack a tuxedo and a fake smile while the messages burned a hole in my mind. I had to stand on the beach and watch my oldest son commit his life to a woman while I knew the woman standing next to me was already halfway out the door. The pressure was a physical force. Every congratulatory remark from a guest felt like a mockery. Every toast to our 35 years felt like a lie that was being shouted in a crowded room. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone into the ocean. I am 60 years old, and I have learned that emotional outbursts are a waste of resources. I waited until the night of the rehearsal dinner to speak to her. I kept my voice low in the privacy of our suite. I asked her about Milan. I asked her why she was exchanging hearts with another man while we were celebrating our anniversary. Catherine did not offer a defense. She did not apologize. She panicked. She descended into a hysterical avoidance. She began to drink the tequila from the minibar as if it were water. She drank until she was incoherent. The resort staff had to bring a wheelchair to our room because she couldn't walk. She missed the wedding brunch the next morning. She was a ghost at her own son's celebration because she couldn't face the reality of her own choices. While she was passed out, I saw another message arrive on her phone. She had texted Milan to tell him that I had seen the messages. She told him to stop the inappropriate talk for now. But then I saw his response and her reply. Milan told her that I was being controlling and that she was a grown woman who could make her own choices. Catherine agreed with him. She was reinforcing the narrative that I was the villain for noticing her betrayal. She was choosing the man who was helping her destroy her family. This is not the first time I have been in this position. 20 years ago, Catherine went on a trip to Belize and had a physical affair there. I was devastated. I moved out for 6 months. I had emotional stability issues then that stemmed from my childhood. But I decided to reconcile. I chose the family. It took 10 years of counseling to move past it. I took what I call little shots for a decade to make sure she felt the weight of what she had done. But I thought we were in a great place. I thought my forgiveness had purchased a lifetime of loyalty. I was wrong. My mercy had been interpreted as weakness, and my patience had been seen as a license to repeat the offense. The return to Washington, D.C. was a descent into a cold reality. The Georgetown house felt like a museum of a life that was already dead. The silk curtains and the mahogany furniture were just artifacts of a contract that Catherine had unilaterally terminated. She refused to cut Milan off. She claimed it was just a friendship. She used my past struggle with stability as a weapon against me. She told me that my reaction to her affair was proof that I was still unstable. She reframed my 15 years of self-improvement as a sign of permanent damage. She told our sons that I was having a hard time. She began to build a wall of social protection around herself by painting me as the aggressor. Then, the floor dropped out completely. Catherine moved out. She did not go to a hotel or to her sister's house. She moved into the house that Milan shared with his wife. She stayed there for 4 days while he was preparing for a trip back to South Africa. The social audacity of that move was a deliberate execution of my dignity. She stayed in the home of the man she was betraying me with while his own wife was in the next room. It was a declaration that the rules of our society no longer applied to her. She was showing me that my 35 years of loyalty meant nothing compared to the excitement of a new audience. She eventually moved to stay with friends from her church. These are people who see her as a wounded soul and me as the man who drove her to a breakdown. Shortly after she left, she suffered a total mental collapse. There were severe panic attacks that left her gasping for air. There was a week-long stay in a psychiatric ward at a local hospital. I was there every day. I sat in the sterile chairs of the unit and I brought her the things she likes. I brought her the books she reads and the tea she drinks. During those 7 days, she seemed to return to me. We spoke about the future. We spoke about the 4 sons who were now caught in the crossfire of our collapsing world. I felt a flicker of hope that the 35 years still held some weight. I thought the hospital stay had cleared the affair fog. I was wrong again. The day after she was discharged, she went completely no contact. She stopped answering my calls. She blocked my messages. Then the email arrived. It was long and drafted with a coldness that felt like a surgical strike. She stated that she wanted a divorce. She claimed that my emotional reactions to her affairs had caused her too much damage to continue. She made me the villain of the story. She is currently refusing to acknowledge the reality of her choices. She is convinced that she is finding herself and that I am her jailer. She has taken the history of my struggle and turned it into a weapon to use in a divorce court. A divorce in our position would be financially ruinous for both of us. The brownstone in Georgetown and the retirement accounts and the investments we spent decades building are all at risk. In a city like Washington, your reputation is your only real currency, and she is spending mine to buy her freedom. She is telling everyone that I am the reason for her breakdown. She is framing my pain as abuse. She is using the fact that I am a stable and focused man to paint me as cold and calculating. She is betting on my desire to save her. She is betting on my loyalty to the family we built. I am sitting in my study now, watching the winter light fade over the Potomac. I have spent 15 years in counseling to become the man I am today. I am not the unstable man I was in my 30s. I am not drinking and I am not yelling. I am simply observing the destruction of my life. I am looking at the data points, and I am realizing that the 35-year plan has been compromised. I am waiting for the silence to break. I am waiting for the holiday to end so I can see what the next step looks like. Every time the phone buzzes, I expect another cold communication from her legal team. I am in a state of high alert, but I have no target. The social pressure is a tightening circle. Our sons are caught in a vacuum of information. They see a father who is quiet and a mother who is just in the hospital. They do not see the messages from Milan. They do not see the wheelchair in Cancun. They only see the wreckage. 2 of them have stopped calling me. They think I am the reason their mother had a collapse. I am losing my children because I am refusing to lie about why their mother left. I am being erased from my own family in real time. I am sitting here in the Georgetown silence, and I am realizing that I am the only one who still remembers the truth. I have asked her to tap the brakes. I have sent emails asking her to wait until the holidays are over so we can speak like adults. She has not acknowledged a single word. She has figured to start the next steps after the new year. I can feel the momentum of the legal system beginning to gather. I am a man who understands how to navigate the power structures of this city, but I am currently powerless in my own living room. The uncertainty is a heavy weight in this house. Every time the floorboards creak, I expect it to be a process server. I am just a man in a brownstone waiting for the world to tell him what he has left to lose. I look at the stacks of paper on my desk, the deeds and the bank records and the history of our life. I realize that she thinks she knows me. She thinks she knows exactly how I will react because she has seen me struggle before. She is counting on my instability. She is counting on my desire to save her. But she has forgotten who I am when I am not being her husband. She has forgotten that I did not survive 30 years in the high-stakes world of Washington, D.C. by being a victim. She thinks she has the upper hand because she stopped talking. She thinks silence is a shield. The holidays are approaching and the city is slowing down. The lawyers are taking their vacations and the courts are quiet. But I know that the silence is temporary. I know that as soon as the calendar turns, the letters will start arriving. The life I spent 35 years building will be dismantled piece by piece. I am not planning and I am not acting. I am simply existing in the space between what was and what will be. I am waiting for the fog to clear on her terms while I stand guard over the grave of my marriage. I am watching the lights of the city, and I am realizing that the woman I married is gone, and the person who replaced her is an adversary who knows all my weaknesses. I have done everything the counselors told me to do. I have stayed calm and I have been patient, and the result is a no-contact email and a divorce filing. The system I believed in has failed me. The rules I followed have led me to a dead end. I am standing in the middle of a social and financial cage, and the door is being locked from the outside. I am sitting in the dark, and I am realizing that my mercy was a mistake. I thought I was being a good man by staying. Instead, I was just giving her 20 more years to gather the information she needed to ruin me. I am waiting for the first day of the new year. I am waiting to see if there is anything left to save. The winter in Washington has a way of turning the humidity of the summer into a sharp and unforgiving cold. I spent the first 2 weeks of January inside the brownstone, listening to the silence of the house. I stopped trying to reach her. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes for a message that would never come. Instead, I began to look at the space she left behind with the eyes of a man conducting an inventory of a lost shipment. I was not looking for a way back anymore. I was looking for the truth of how we got here. I spent my nights in the study. The mahogany desk was covered in the physical records of 35 years. I was not building a case yet. I was simply trying to understand the depth of the deception. I looked at the old files from 20 years ago, the records of the affair in Belize. I found the old counseling notes I had kept in a locked drawer. I read her words from a decade ago when she promised that I was the only man she ever wanted to grow old with. I looked at those promises while the blue light of the Georgetown street lamps filtered through the curtains. I realized that the woman who made those promises had been a stranger even then. The pressure from the outside is growing. I hear fragments of the narrative she is building. Through our sons, I hear that she is telling people she is afraid of my temper. She is using the fact that I blew a gasket in Cancun as proof that I am a danger to her mental health. She is framing my 15 years of emotional work as a permanent instability. The church friends in Alexandria are shielding her. They see her as a wounded bird, and they see me as the cage. I am being erased from the social fabric of the city I have served for 30 years. I walk into the club, and I see the heads turn away. I see the whispers in the corners of the dining room. I am the man who drove his wife to a breakdown. I am the villain in a story I did not write. I began to look at the digital trails she left behind. I did not hire anyone. I simply used the access I already had to our joint accounts. I looked at the EasyPass records. I looked at the timestamps of her car crossing the bridges into Virginia. I saw a pattern that stretched back much further than the wedding in Mexico. She was making trips at night while I was away on business. She was crossing the river while I was in London or Singapore. The affair with Malik was not a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a slow and methodical relocation of her life. Every time I was securing a supply line in another time zone, she was building a bridge to a different future. The realization that I have been a spectator in my own life is a cold weight in my chest. I looked at the credit card statements. I saw the charges for restaurants I never visited. I saw the purchases from boutiques she never mentioned. I realized that I have been funding her exit for over a year. I have been paying for the very moments that were designed to destroy me. The financial ruin she mentioned in her email is not a threat, it is a plan. She is waiting for the new year to settle before she initiates the final liquidation of our assets. She is waiting for the moment when she has the maximum leverage. I found the messages she had archived from a previous year. She had missed a few during her cleanup. I saw Malik telling her that she deserved a life where she didn't have to manage my moods. I saw her telling him that she was just waiting for the right moment to leave. They discussed the Georgetown house. They discussed the investments. They were talking about my retirement funds as if they were a prize they had already won. I sat in the dark, and I felt the heat of a 30-year marriage cooling into a block of ice.
Our sons are the hardest part. I see them trying to navigate the two versions of the truth. I see the doubt in their eyes when they look at me. They see a father who is quiet and a mother who was hospitalized. They don't see the EasyPass records. They don't see the archived messages. They only see the wreckage, and they are looking for someone to blame. I am losing them one conversation at a time. The silence between us is a growing chasm. I want to tell them the truth, but I realize that the truth is a weapon they are not ready to handle. I am living in a state of high alert. Every time the doorbell rings, I expect a process server. Every time an email arrives, I expect a notice of filing. I am watching the calendar turn, and I am realizing that the window for observation is closing. The uncertainty is no longer a fear, it is a tactical reality. I am standing in a house that is no longer a home, and I am waiting for the first shot to be fired. I have no plan. I have no team. I only have the cold facts of a life that has been dismantled while I was watching the wrong door. I looked at the photos of us from the early days. We were young and we were broke and we were sure of each other. I tried to find the moment when she changed. I tried to find the exact point where the loyalty ended and the calculation began. But there is no such point. There is only a slow erosion that I was too comfortable to notice. I am 60 years old, and I am realizing that my stability was my greatest blind spot. I believed that because I was consistent, she was too. The house is cold tonight. The heating system is humming, but the warmth doesn't reach the study. I am looking at the final folder of documents I gathered for myself. It is a record of everything she has taken and everything she plans to take. I am not acting. I am not calling lawyers. I am just holding the information. I am waiting for the holiday to pass. I am waiting for the day when the silence becomes a scream. I am waiting for the moment when I have to decide if I am the man who forgives or the man who survives. The light is changing over the Potomac, and the new year is almost here. I am standing in the dark, and I am listening for the sound of the first crack in the ice.
The pressure in the room was suffocating. I realized then that I wasn't going to get an apology. I wasn't going to get the sons to side with me. I was just going to get the assets. I presented the final piece of information. I had already contacted the compliance department at Malik's firm. I didn't tell them about the affair. I told them about the use of company travel vouchers to fund his personal trips with my wife. Malik was already being investigated. His visa was under review. He wouldn't be moving to Cape Town with her. He would be lucky if he wasn't facing a civil suit. Evelyn's lawyer tried to pivot, but the momentum was gone. The narrative of the victim had been compromised by the evidence of the architect. We spent the next 4 hours in a grueling negotiation. It was a war of inches. I didn't get everything. I kept the Georgetown house, but I had to buy out her remaining interest at a price that would hurt my retirement. I kept the primary investment accounts, but I had to give up the property we owned in the valley. It was a settlement that left both of us diminished. When we finally stood up to leave, the sons didn't come to me. They didn't go to her either. They walked out of the room together, leaving their parents to deal with the wreckage they had created. The look they gave me was one of cold disappointment. They saw a mother who had lied and a father who had spent months building a cage to catch her. They saw two people who had turned 35 years of family into a business transaction. I walked back to the Georgetown house alone. The winter sun was setting, casting long, jagged shadows across the brick sidewalks. I walked through the heavy oak doors, and I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like the survivor of a slow-motion car crash. The house was mine, but the life inside it was gone. I walked through the empty rooms, looking at the spots on the walls where her paintings used to hang. She had taken her things, but she had left the silence. I checked the locks. I set the alarm. I sat in my study, and I looked at the dark river. Malik was gone, his career in the district effectively over. Evelyn was moving into a small apartment in a part of the city we used to avoid. The church friends had gone quiet once the details of the financial transfers began to leak out. I had my reputation back, but it felt hollow. In Washington, a clean reputation is just a mask you wear to keep people from seeing the scars. I am 60 years old. I have the house and I have the money, but I have a holiday season coming up where the table will be empty. My sons will call, but the conversations will be short. They will never look at me the same way again, and they will never trust their mother. That was the price of the truth. It was a price I was willing to pay, but as I sit in the dark, I realize that the cost was higher than I anticipated. There was no triumph. There was only the end of the war. I had managed the risk. I had secured the assets. I had dismantled the lie. But as the lights of the city reflected on the Potomac, I realized that I was just a man in a locked house standing guard over a legacy that had turned to ash. The fog had cleared, but the landscape it revealed was a wasteland. I am stable. I am secure.
and I am entirely alone.
The meeting took place in a windowless conference room in a building on K Street. The air was dry and smelled of expensive paper and stale coffee. This was not the cinematic showdown I had once imagined. There was no dramatic music and no sudden confession. There was only the sound of a heater rattling and the rustle of legal documents. I sat across from Evelyn. She was flanked by her lawyer, a woman who looked like she had spent her career perfecting the art of the empathetic frown. Behind them sat our two oldest sons. They were not there to support me. They were there to ensure their mother didn't collapse again. Their presence was a physical weight, a reminder that in their eyes, I was still the architect of her breakdown. Evelyn looked pale. She wore a soft gray sweater and kept her hands folded on the table. She didn't look like a woman who had been planning a relocation to South Africa. She looked like someone who had spent 35 years being crushed by the man sitting across from her. Her lawyer started speaking, using terms like emotional distress and coercive control. She talked about the 10 years of little shots I had fired at Evelyn after the Belize affair. She framed our entire history as a long, slow accumulation of my resentment. It was a good narrative. It was almost believable. I did not interrupt. I waited until they were done asking for the Georgetown house and 70% of the liquid assets. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the audit I had spent the last month compiling. I didn't throw it on the table. I passed a copy to each of them, including my sons. It was not a folder of photos. It was a spreadsheet. It was a timeline of every dollar that had left our joint accounts over the last 18 months and every mile her car had traveled across the Potomac. The silence that followed was heavy. I spoke in a voice that was flat and devoid of emotion. I didn't talk about betrayal. I talked about math. I pointed to the payments made to a rental apartment in Alexandria that I had never visited. I pointed to the transfers to Malik's personal account. Then I turned the page to the medical records from the week of her hospitalization. I didn't mention her mental state. I mentioned the logs of her phone usage during the hours she was supposedly in a catatonic state. I showed the records of her coordination with Malik to ensure that church friends were told exactly what to say about me. The shift in the room was not a victory. It was a fracture. I saw my oldest son lean back, his eyes moving from the spreadsheet to his mother. He didn't look at her with sympathy anymore. He looked at her with a profound, quiet confusion. Evelyn didn't defend herself. She didn't have to. She just looked at the table and said that she did it because I made her life a prison for 20 years. She used my own forgiveness against me, claiming that the debt I held over her head for the Belize affair was what had driven her into Malik's arms.